Alright, here is the list I'm going to be playtesting. This is a pretty refined Bant collected company list. I experimented with a bunch of different configurations for Bant CoCo in the beta on Magic Online. And this was pretty close. I think Sylvan Advocate is the one card that really makes this tick, makes this list tick. I tried a list that was a little bit more reactive, um, and had a couple more value creatures in it, like Eldrazi Sky Spawner and stuff like that. Which I had pretty good results with. Um, I'm gonna playtest this list along with a few other lists. I think multiple collected company lists I'm gonna test out. Probably the rally list as well. But this is the first one that I'm gonna playtest. This is a really fun deck. There's a lot of play to this green-white base deck. Um, so just going through, I mean, if you're Bant, if you're touching blue, basically you want to be running Jace in this format. The card's absurdly good. This deck only runs never mind. It runs 9 non-creature spells. So it's not like you're always going to have a target to flashback, but the looting is really nice to clear extra lands, or even there are cases where you want to find extra lands when you have multiple advocates in play. Um, in terms of the creatures, there's one Warden, just because you kind of need early drops that are interactive, not just Jaces. I didn't design this list, so I can't speak to exactly why. But the curves where your mana is a little bit awkward, if you have Warden to sort of play on one and just have a way to use some of your mana early when you have to skip your 2-drop, for example, or you just don't have a 2-drop, you can fill your curve by pumping this or whatever. One Nissa is sort of, I think, just a miser Nissa in the list. It's a decent value creature. It can take over the late game, sort of in a similar vein to Sylvan Advocate. It doesn't attack or block well. This is probably one of the first cards I would cut from this list. 3 Den Protectors, 3 Death Mist Raptors are self-explanatory. The combination of those 8 cards can just take the game over. 4 Reflector Mages are the big get that this deck got in Oath of the Gatewatch. Reflector Mage is absurd. You can bounce huge Eldrazi, even bouncing Rhino is fine. Yeah, it's just such a big tempo play, and when you have all of these three power 3-drops, Death Mist Raptor, Den Protector to some extent, and Bounding Crisis, Reflector Mage usually is punching you through for like 6 damage. The card's really good. It's a great hit off Collected Company. Yeah, and Bounding Crisis is similar to Reflector Mage. It packs a bigger punch. You can play it at instant speed outside of Collected Company, which is huge. It allows you to play around sweepers. Chandra is a card that preys on this deck a little bit. Same thing with Ugin, although you do have some morphs, so you can diversify your threats to survive. And Ugin coming down against the Eldrazi ramp decks. Yeah, the Bounding Crisis is nice. One of the other cards that just completely crushes this deck is Radiant Flames, and Bounding Crisis is another way for you to play around that, and not just get completely blown out by it. And then there's a couple Ojitize commands, which, one of the play patterns that this deck finds itself in is on turn 4, playing with open mana and threatening Bounding Crisis, Collected Company, and Ojitize command, which means that you get to play both reactively and proactively at the same time. Ojitize command can counter a spell and bring back Sylvan Advocate, which can apply a ton of pressure. It can bring back Jace. And if you have the option, or are even just threatening either one, it makes it really difficult for your opponent to make the optimal play on their turn, because they're going to be playing around one or the other, or they're just going to say, well, I have to hope he has neither, and just go ahead and play what they're going to play, which usually results in you countering like a Siege Rhino or Collected Company following like a Gideon, and then just killing the Gideon the following turn, or when you untap. So that's really the top end of the curve in this deck, and sometimes you play 1-drop, 2-drop, open mana on turn 3, Bounding Crisis, and then turn 4 open mana, and it's just so difficult for your opponent to win in those situations. Um, The mana base is pretty self-explanatory. There's a couple pain lands in here. The original list that I was testing with, I actually was playing Eldrazi Displacer, I think, for a while because it's just so good with Reflector Mage. And the list that I was running was definitely less aggressive than this one. It was a little bit more mid-rangey. I think it was running multiple Nissas. You could really lock people out with Eldrazi Displacer. So I was running the full set of pain lands and a couple other ways to enable colorless mana. But yeah, the Lumbering Falls are great in this list with Sylvan Advocate. You know, they can get up to 5/5. Super nice. The mana base is pretty consistent. Nothing really to say there. Dromoka's Command, I guess, is the removal spell of choice. I was running a mixture of these and Silk Wrap when I was testing. I think that it might be correct for this list to play some number of Silk Wraps. I'm not sure how many. The sideboard, this is just completely my sideboard. I didn't really take the Star City Games second place lists sideboard. There are some similarities, but I went on the max for Silk Wraps, the max for Clerics, and then one Valor Stance just because the Mardu green deck can be really difficult to beat if you can't actually kill their creatures. Because, yeah, Reflector Mage, if you're applying enough pressure, can deal with a Rhino for a couple of turns. But sometimes you don't have enough pressure, and that deck has access to Radiant Flames out of the board, at least some of the lists. That deck's a really problematic matchup, so the Disdainful Strokes and Valorous Stance are sort of for that matchup. Silk Wrap for Jaces, and the more aggressive decks, which is what Cleric's in there for, and then Dispels to fight some of the Jeskai lists or lists that are just running counterspells in general because you don't have access to Duress, which is one of the best sideboard cards, and one of just the best cards in the format for a while now. Duress has just been fantastic. And then Negate so that I can deal with the bigger Planeswalkers or the middle-of-the-road Planeswalkers as well. There are lists where, or decks that you play against where you don't want Disdainful Stroke, but you do want Negate. I haven't actually found the perfect balance here. It might be correct to run one less Cleric and an additional Negate. I think the counterspells is the main feature of splashing blue in an aggressive list like this, is having access to permission. And Negate is so good in the format because a lot of decks are really soft to Gideon. You know, the Mardu green deck being an example, that deck doesn't really play anything proactive. So when a Gideon comes down, you know, that deck doesn't have a way to deal with it outside of Duress. And then they have like one Ruinous Path in that list. So playing blue, you're a little bit more resilient to the Planeswalkers. And this deck definitely needs to have answers, timely answers, because this deck really wants to hit a critical mass of creatures on board so that you maximize the value of Bounding Krasis, Reflector Mage, and Dromoka's Command. But anyways, I'll go into the matches, and I hope you guys enjoy.